Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us. Yesterday, we spoke about the do's and don'ts about debt counseling. And today, we're going to talk about why debt counseling. Do you need to go under debt counseling? Do you need to go under admin? Or do you need to go under sequestration? But today, we're going to just touch on the base of debt counseling. So what is debt counseling? Debt counseling is a system that's been designed by government, which appointed the regulator called the NCR, the National Credit Regulator, who therefore they appointed debt counselors. Now, a debt counselor is a person who works with the credit providers, the PDA, as well as a consumer. They have to abide by the rules that set out in Regulation 33, as we spoke about yesterday, and saying, listen, we have to work in the framework of the country and look after everybody from the credit providers as well as a consumer. Now, lots of times, debt counselors are more interested in looking after their pocket than you as a consumer. But let's say, for instance, you are going into debt counseling, and what is important is that you need to understand the following. First of all, a debt counselor is a person who has to work out an affordable plan for you. Now, how do they do that? What they will do is they will fill in a Form 16. Form 16 is an application form. So what they will do is they'll take your income, they will take your expenses, and that will give you a net balance. Now, what's important, what I'm saying here, in the Form 16, you've got running expenses and you've got credit agreements. Now, running expenses is food, petrol, water and lights. A cell phone contract is not a credit agreement. Sorry, I'm just looking at the chat. So a cell phone contract is not a credit agreement. A gym contract is not a credit agreement. A rental is not a credit agreement. But if you default on these different agreements, which are service level agreements or rental agreements, that can get put into debt counseling because that forms part of incidental credit. I'm not going to go too much into incidental credit because we're just speaking about mainly on what debt counseling is and how debt counseling can protect you. Now, one of the big things is what debt counselors don't do is they don't do a proper needs analysis when it comes to debt counseling. Now, one of the big things is what we have to look at in the debt counseling is when we do the affordability, we need to take the running expenses first. Now, let's say, for instance, your running expenses is, or let's say, for instance, your net income is 10,000 Rand. But your running expenses, your food, your petrol, your water and lights, your cell phone contract, that comes to 5,000 Rand. But your bond, your car, your credit cards, all of that comes to 8,000 Rand. So if you take your 5,000 Rand of running expenses from the 10,000 Rand, that leaves you with 5,000. The debt counselor has to do the following: work out an affordable plan to pay your creditors. For instance, a bond, you can make an offer of plus minus 80% of the value of the bond and about 75% for the vehicle. All the unsecured debt has to follow suit, and it could be 50%, it could be 60%, and sometimes it might be 30%. Because it's not what the credit provider wants, is what you can afford. Now, the problem is what a lot of debt counselors do is they follow and say you have to pay at least 50%. that is the industry rules. What you can afford is what you can afford. Now, what will happen after the debt council has done your affordability, they will send out a 17.1. The 17.1 will let the credit providers know that you applied for debt review. The credit providers will send you a COB. Now, what is a COB? A COB is a certificate of balance, which will show you your outstanding balance, what is your installment, are you paying credit life, and what the term of the debt is, and when the debt was opened. That will come back to the debt council. They will feed this into a PDA system, a payment distributing system. They will get the list of all your credits and they will load it into the system. And the system will then calculate what is the percentage that you are over indebted. Now, the debt counselor will look and say, hang on, Ron, you are over indebted. And they will then send out a 17.2. A 17.2 will then notify the credit providers that you are over indebted, and the debt council will start doing the negotiations. They can negotiate the interest, but it's not set in stone. It's only if the credit provider is prepared to reduce the interest. In the Act, it doesn't say that the credit providers has to reduce the interest. They can reduce the installment, they can extend the installment, and it will come through, see if the credit providers is happy with the 5,000 Rand you offer. The debt council has got 60 working days to put your file into court and get an order granted. Now, sometimes the order will not be granted in the 60 days because as we stand, some of the courts are so busy, some of them, the first hearing will take place probably in 8 months' time, sometimes 10 months' time, maybe 4 months' time. We never know, depending how busy the courts are. But the problem comes in is the debt council must have this case in the court and have a case number. If it's not in the 60 days, the credit providers can withdraw from debt review. This is what's important to make sure that the information you give to the debt counselor is correct, because it must be a copy of your ID, your payslip, as well as, especially if you're married in community of property, both parties has to go into debt review. If one party is left out, it can become an offense, because the debt counselor did not do his work properly, because in community of property means it's one. If you married ANC, anti-national contract, each individual can go through because it's an individual name. Now, what happens after the 60 days? The debt council will negotiate with the credit providers or sometimes with their attorneys, because the debt council might have their own attorneys who's acting on your behalf, and work through the different ways and means to try and solve the debt. But there's a problem with a lot of debt counselors. They will charge you a reckless credit fee, but they don't look at reckless credit. Now, what the debt counselor has to do is go in and look at Regulation 55. And I can guarantee you 90% of the debt counselors don't know what Regulation 55 is. Now, Regulation 55 is, if you want to look at reckless credit, you have to go look at they have to look at the agreement, yeah, the affordability was done, and make sure that the information that the credit provider has got done a proper needs analysis. If not, that can become an offense, and the credit provider can be fined as set out in section 81(2) of the National Credit Act. So when you look at your PDA statement, you must make sure that the information on that PDA statement is correct. Because sometimes what the debt counsellors will do is they will pull your credit report And in that credit report, there could be prescribed debt. And that can hamper your growth or take longer for you to get out of debt review, because what they're basically doing is they're not doing a proper needs analysis. Now, what is prescribed debt? Prescribed debt, that's debt that's older than 3 years, where no money has been received, or no acknowledgement of the debt was made, or no legal action was obtained. That debt becomes prescribed. So that's very important to look at your PDA statement. What's also important when you look at your PDA statement, look at the debt counseling fees. Make sure that the debt counseling fees is done according to the framework that's set out by the regulator. Make sure that the legal fees is paid to an attorney and not to a debt counselor. According to my opinion, I'm not a debt counselor. I'm not there to give financial advice. But of legal advice I got from an attorney, and I also spoke to the Law Society, says a debt counselor cannot share fees with an attorney. So sometimes what will happen, the debt counsel will get monies paid into their account. They will pay the attorney 1,500 Rand to go to court, and meantime they'll pocket another 7,000 Rand in their pocket. So they're more interested in looking after themselves than you as a consumer. Number two, what's important in your PDA statement? Make sure a lot of debt counsellors are charging credit life. I haven't got a problem with that, but did they cancel the credit life that was on that credit agreement? Sometimes the credit life has been charged, as well as credit life has been charged on your original credit agreements, which will then extend the term of your debt. Who's getting the commission? Is that debt counselor registered with the Financial Services Board? Double check that out. If not, put a complaint in. Those are things that you have to look for in the PDA statements. As I showed you yesterday, some of these guys is more interested in their pocket by charging fees, and the first credit provider will probably be paid in the 4th, 5th, or 6th month, because the debt counselor at the end of the day thinks they are getting, they're the most important person. They're the one who drives all the fancy cars. Remember, when you deal with a debt counselor, deal with him in his own personal capacity. Find out what his NCR number is. If you deal with a call center agent and the debt counselor is not prepared to deal with you, walk away. Take his NCR number, go onto the NCR database, see if he's still registered. If you're not happy, speak to the NCR and say, listen, I tried to deal with this company, but they're not prepared to give me the debt counselor's name. Walk away, because Section 44 of the National Credit Act says only the debt counselor can deal with a consumer. Those are the important parts when you go into debt review. Now, what's important going into debt review is just make payments as set out by the proposal. As long as you keep to the proposal, what the debt counselor puts forward to you, you can get out of debt quite easy. But if you're going to start missing payments, the credit provider can withdraw from debt review and they can go for legal action. So there's two ways a debt counselor can withdraw, or a credit provider can withdraw from debt review. What they'll do is they will send you an 8610, which is they terminating the debt review. That is before an order gets granted, and after an order has been granted is, they call in Section 88.3. And through that processes, they can go for summons and judgment. The other thing what you need to look at is a debt counselor can go through to the consumer tribunal to get a consent order, or the magistrate. Now, the tribunal is where all the credit providers has agreed on what the debt counselor is offering towards your debt, and they will put it in in a form and submit it to the tribunal, and the tribunal will put a stamp on, which is a nice process. But the reason I don't like this process, because the tribunal has got the same powers as a high court. And if there's ever a problem, it's a high court application. Therefore, I would rather suggest magistrates court. The debt counsellors love the tribunal because they hide their legal fees. And the legal fees for the tribunal is about 850. Just look at those statements and make sure that the information is done correctly on the PDA statements. Look at your PDA statements on a regular basis. Also, pull your credit agreements from the creditors and make sure that there's no additional fees that's been charged. So when you work with a debt counselor at the same time, at least speak to them once a month, just to make sure that they're still in business. I mean, sometimes consumers don't even know that the debt counselor has been suspended, or they close their doors and nobody knows where they are. That's why it's important, always make contact with the debt counselor you're dealing with. Is there any questions that you want to ask? You can put it in the chat, and let's see how we can assist each other going forward. Bumi, is there any questions you would like to ask, or any Sishle, Ukunu, Gumede, any questions you'd like to ask? There is a chat button on there, or you can unmute yourself and speak to me. Well, while you're thinking of questions, what do you do if you're not happy of your proposal, or the debt counsel did not act in good faith? What you can do is you can go onto the NCR database. It's www.ncr.org.za. Go in and download a form 29. That's a complaint form, and put your complaint in there. What I will do is I will also send that complaint form to the EAP head office, that they can send out to all the EAP practitioners. And if you've got any complaints, that's what you can utilize. And that will help a lot of your employees who's on a debt review and not happy with their proposals. And let's change people's lives by making Department of Health, or anybody that's on government, or anybody working for a company, to make them credit worthy, and also make sure that the stuff is done correctly. Okay, the one question from Pumi is it possible to get out of the DC before they agree a time? First of all, never give your ID number out to anybody. Just ask them to fill in the form 16, leave your ID number out, let them do a proper needs analysis, because what the debt counselors normally do is they load you on the NCR database, and then it's very difficult to transfer, because what they're basically doing is chasing money. So just make sure that affordability gets done correctly, and get some input from the DC you're dealing with, that you can qualify for debt review. Sometimes you don't need debt counseling. Sometimes all you need is to work directly with the credit providers, as I spoke last week, applying the snowball effect. The only way I would look going under debt counseling is if I'm at least more than 20% over indebted. What I mean by that, let's say, for instance, I'm sitting with a car and I know they might come and repossess my car, because the car is important, the house is important. That's when I will apply, protect my assets. But if I've got unsecured debts, I would rather work with a credit provider and make negotiations. And sometimes it's also good to speak to the credit providers, because sometimes your debt is not as bad as it looks. All you need is maybe get a second opinion or speak to somebody who understands finance. Let them do a proper budget for you. And maybe go speak to an attorney that they can maybe arrange a better installment. I'm not saying don't go for debt counseling. I'm just saying is depending on your situation. Not everybody needs debt counseling. But a debt counselor will always look at an opportunity to put you into debt review. Now, what I didn't speak to you guys about is the fees. A debt counselor, if you're married in community of property, can charge up to 8,000 Rand for an agreement. If you're married in community of property, you can pay up to 9,000 and 5% up to maximum of 450 Rand per month. The legal fees is not set in stone. Some have seen legal fees up to 15,000, 20,000 Rand. Double check that. Sometimes I would suggest go see your own attorney and move your file to another debt counsel if you're not happy with those legal fees, because you're working with that attorney. When you are married A and C as an individual, it is 8,000 Rand. So you can see, all I have to do is sign up 10 people. I've got 80,000 Rand in my pocket. Sign up 100 people. Hey, I could buy myself a nice motor car. So that's why it's very important when you deal with a debt counselor to make sure that he's there for you as a consumer and not for their pocket. So guys, on that note, do your budgets, look at your budgets, look at the credit life, look at the fees, make sure that the amount on the PDA statement is correct. There are three different, I think there's 3 PDAs. It is DC Partners, Hyphen, and Maximus. So work with those. Pull your statement on a regular basis. If you don't get it from the debt counsel, you can get it directly from the PDAs. Any questions? You guys have got my email. You've got my cell phone number. You'll see it's on the screen. I will try and assist where I can. Have a wonderful day. And remember, budget, save money, and let's make South Africa a better place. Thank you.